JavaScript statements. Okay. So now when you observe that any programming language is composed of statements, okay, and in the same way, like a simple analogy would be in English language again, if you want to write an English language a simple essay, then essay consists of paragraphs in turn will consist of statements, okay, single sentences or statements. All right, in the same way, like a programming language, for that matter any programming language will contain a statement called as JavaScript statements. All right, and these JavaScript statements is a list of programming statements. Okay, now we have seen a JavaScript program is a list of programming statements. Now this particular statement consists of many aspects to it. Okay, what are those different aspects? Just a second. All right, now coming back to this particular thing, the statements. Now if you take a simple example, we took that simple example that a person or a player in a yellow jersey is kicking the ball. So this is a simple English statement. Okay, we saw that at the very beginning of our JavaScript learning. We gave a simple statement saying a football player in yellow jersey is kicking the ball. Now this English kind of a statement, okay, it might be English statement or English sentence. This sentence consists of many parts of the sentence. Okay, one is a noun, it contains an adjective, it contains a verb. In the same way, JavaScript statements also contain certain compositions. Okay, what are those? It contains values, it contains operators, expressions, keywords, comments, and so on. Okay, now in order to understand a simple JavaScript statement, we need to understand what these individual segments are or compositions are made of. So which means, let's take this example. What is this? There is something called as let amount is equal to 88 plus 2. All right, now what is this? It contains this is a simple JavaScript statement and it ends with a semicolon. Now understand this, the let, what you see here, let, const, var, all these are called as keywords. Okay, any word that is part of the vocabulary of a programming language, in this case JavaScript. Okay, so any programming language will contain a certain words which are part of the vocabulary of that programming language. Like for example, printf. Printf is a part of C programming language or C++ programming language. In the same way, let is a reserved word or a keyword that is part of the vocabulary of JavaScript, and they are reserved. You cannot use them for naming any variable or any function or anything like that, and they are particularly reserved for the JavaScript programming language. And the next one, what we call it as amount. Amount is a variable, okay, a named reference to a value. This is a value and it is a name associated with that value. All right, now understand there are certain things here. A variable can be a storage or a name that is given to a value, reference value. It might be a variable, it might be an identifier, it might be a function, it might be a class name. All those are part of your variables. All right, and the next one, you have an equal to and plus symbol. Okay, equal to, minus, plus, multiply, divide, all these are called as operators. And operators are what? They are reserved words that are perform action on values and variables, which means this is a variable and these are the values and they are performing certain actions, which means 88 plus 2, which is addition operation, is going on, and the value of this addition, which amounts to 90, and that is being assigned to a variable called amount. All right, now what you understand here is these are called operators. Okay, and then the combination of these two. Okay, 88 plus 2, here there is some kind of operation that is happening among the values, and this is called as expression. an expression always result in a single value. Like 88 plus 2 will result in a single value called 90. All right. So an expression, a reference or value or a group of reference values combined with operators which results in a single value is called as an expression. All right. So again, and then we are going to talk about a statement. A statement is what? A statement is a group of words or numbers or operators that do a task, which is this entire thing is called as a statement, which is in particularly a JavaScript statement, a group of words, numbers, and operators that do a task. What task is being done here? The addition of these two values and then assigning it to a variable, which means the 90 value is stored in the variable called amount, and that this entire thing is called as a statement. So with that being said, the statements are always executed one by one in the order they are written. Like for example, if you have a first console.log, like let me go here. I'm going to open the web console, which is basically of the developer tools. Now let's say let num1 is equal to 123 is simple. Then shift enter, which will allow me to enter the next one. Num2 is equal to, I'm saying 234. Okay, and then there is a total amount. Okay, or let's say just make it as amount is equal to num1 plus num2, and then I am doing what? Console.log, and then I am printing what? Amount. Now very simple. Now understand this one by one. This is a most simple piece of code written in JavaScript using DevTools inside the console tab. All right. What it contains? It contains basically four statements, four JavaScript statements. The first statement is this, the second one is this, third one is this, and the fourth one is this. Now whenever JavaScript executes the code, it starts from here. Initially 123 is assigned to a variable called num1, and then 234 is assigned to a variable called num2, and then these two, which is storing the value of 123 and 234 respectively in num1 and num2, I'm summing it up, which means addition of these two numbers will be assigned to a variable called amount, which will be third statement that would be executed, and finally the amount would be stored here in the amount will store the sum of num1 and num2, and in the fourth statement it will be showing the output on the web console. If I just hit enter now, it will show 357, which is sum of these two, which is num1 and num2 will be displayed. So always remember that the execution of the JavaScript statements will always starts from top to bottom, which is it will execute one by one and in the order they are written, which is from the top to bottom. All right. And semicolon separates JavaScript statements. Again, semicolon is not mandatory, it is optional. But if you have multiple statements, if you want to write, for example, this is there, I want to add it here. Suppose I want to add these two statements in the same line. Okay, this I can do that, but for that I need to enter a semicolon. Here it becomes mandatory. If I remove this, it will be kind of a error. Like if I remove the semicolon here, then the JavaScript will get confused whether this statement ends here or ends here. So what it assumes is it will end here because this is the semicolon. Now it will throw an error. All right, but but in this case where you have, like for example, if it is written in all three statements, I can remove the semicolon here because here end of line is a end of statement, which means here semicolon will become optional. All right. So always remember that semicolon in JavaScript is optional if each statement is written in a separate line. But if it is written in a single line, then semicolon becomes mandatory because this will act as an end of statement for this particular statement. Okay, so now this is absolutely fine because you're putting that in the same line. But what happens if I remove the semicolon? Then you observe that this will throw an error. What does this say? Syntax error, unexpected identifier called let, which is this is what it is talking about. Now it will JavaScript will read from top to bottom, which is one by one. The moment it reads this end, it is it is not expecting the let here because it is not treated as an end of line. All right. So that is the reason the syntax error throws up. Whereas in this case, semicolon is there, which means this statement has ended here. And again, this statement has ended here. All right. So there are two statements in a single line. All right. Now, and what else? JavaScript ignores ignores multiple spaces or white spaces, we call it as, and also JavaScript is case sensitive. And that is something that we already seen it, which means JavaScript ignores the multiple spaces, which is the white spaces, and also JavaScript is a case sensitive language. All right. Now that we have seen what JavaScript statement is, now let's go a little bit inside and try to understand what are these identifiers. Okay. Now, variable is one of the identifier. Definitely, variable is an identifier. The name of the variable is an identifier. Now, let's see. What are these identifiers? Every programming language has got identifiers. And what are those? A variable, a named reference to a value, which means you have a value, and that value, in this case here, there is a value called 123. And for this, if you want to give a name, then you are assigning a variable name. Now, in this case, num1 is a variable, whereas 123 is a value. So a named reference to a value is called a variable. But now let's assume there's a person here. He's saying I'm Ravi. So what it means is, if you observe the person, he's a male, but you don't know what name he is until he is assigned a name. So now in this case, he's saying I am a Ravi. So which means this person, he is having a named reference to a value called Ravi. All right. Now at the same time, what is an identifier? Identifier is a name. Again, it is a name given to identify a variable, function, class, module, or other objects. Now, I can say a simple thing. Okay, identifier is nothing but a user defined name. It is a name. And what is and what sort of a name? For whom the name is given? The name is given to a variable or a function or a class or a module or an object. These are different elements or different compositions of a programming language. There might be a variable which stores a data or a value, and there is a function, and function contains a set of executable JavaScript statements. And so is the case with class. Class will create an object, an instance of a class will create an object. A number of objects can be created. A module is again which might contain a set of JavaScript functions, classes, or statements together would create a module. And then there is also an object that can be created. So what it means is, you can say, like, for example, let me try to give one example to you. One example, what you saw is a variable name. Okay, now there is also a variable name that you can give it to a function. Like, for example, I'll clear the screen, which is Control L. It will clear the screen. Let's say function is a keyword, and then I'm writing a function name. Let's say add number. Okay, let's say add number. And then there is curly open parenthesis, which will, if it contains any parameters you can give. If it doesn't contain, you no need to. Okay, maybe I'll use this. Now simple. What it contains: a function which contains, function is again a keyword, add name. So this add num, what you see here, this is an identifier. This is an identifier because it is a name given to a function. That is the reason this is an identifier. So always remember that identifier is a name assigned to a function, variable, class, module, and all that. So in this case, add name is a user defined name that is known as an identifier. Okay. Now, whenever I call this function, let's say I'm going to call add num. This is a function call, and then if I execute, it will return me 25 because let num is 12, num2 is 13, 13 plus 12 will be 25, and this value of 25 will be stored in total. This is the variable, and this will be output on the web console, and that is the reason it is throwing the value called 24. 25. So now guys, don't worry about how the function works. We'll go deep dive into it when we learn functions. For now, the takeaway of this learning is that this variable is an identifier. This function name is also an identifier. That is what you need to understand. So identifier is used to link a value to a name. That is the case with variable. And identifiers are common, made up of, so how do you name the identifier? They are always alphanumeric characters. It can have underscore, it can have the dollar sign. Okay, that is the naming convention. How do you name a identifier? You can't go ahead and write identifier with a hyphen or a colon inside it, so that is not valid. When you are naming an identifier, which might be a variable, which might be a function, which might be a class, module, or any other object, it should always contain alphanumeric characters, or underscore can be used in identifier naming. That is also acceptable, or a dollar sign can also be used. All right, we'll take that one example. Identifiers are not allowed to start with numbers. You cannot start an identifier with the numbers. It should always start with either alphanumeric, underscore, or dollar. Let's see that an example here. Like, let me clear here. Let's say I want to say const pi. Let's say I want to say pi is equal to 3.142. All right. Now what it contains, pi, again this is a alpha, this is a capital letters, which is acceptable as an identifier, and this will have no issue. If I go ahead and type pi, it will return 3.142, which is a valid identifier name. Okay. Now let's take with this example as well. So let's say const dollar price is equal to 24.75. All right. Now what it contains, the variable name is starting with a dollar sign, which is also fine in JavaScript. Okay, you can start the identifier or a variable name with a dollar sign, which is acceptable. You can also, what you do, let's say interest, interest, let interest is equal to let's say 7.15%. All right. Now what you are observing here, the variable name, which is again an identifier, is starting with a underscore, which is also fine. It is acceptable. It is acceptable to have a identifier starting with the underscore. It can start with underscore, it can start with dollar sign, it can also start with the alphanumeric characters, but it cannot start with number. Let's say that example, 9 value. Let's say I want to give us 9 value is equal to number 9. Now, if I enter, it will throw an error. So what is it saying? Invalid or unexpected token. which means you cannot start an identifier with a number. That is not accepted. Okay, so that is the reason it is throwing an error. But I can do this way. I can go alphanumeric, let's say value 9 I can add. Okay, this is fine. This is absolutely fine. So I can say value 9 and it will return me the value 9, because it is not starting with a number, but it is starting with the alphabet and ends with a number. That is fine. A number can be, because identifier can be a alphanumeric character, so it is absolutely fine. All right, and that is what we saw here in terms of identifiers. All right, now let's go a bit further to see what are these JavaScript reserved or keywords. So initially in our example here, let is a keyword. Okay, and again we also use const is also a keyword. All right, now let's see what they are. Keywords have a special meaning in a language and they are part of the syntax. That's what we saw. And for example, function is also a keyword which declares a function. We saw that here in our example where we said, let me clear this, function add num. We saw that, right, guys? Here, this function is also a keyword which will declare a function. And then let declares a block variable. This is also a keyword. And then try and catch. These are for exceptional handling, error handling. All right. And try is also a keyword that is reserved by the language, that are being part of the language, which is JavaScript. Now, reserved words are the words that cannot be used as identifier. Now we saw keywords. There is a slight difference here. Okay, I'll come to a final statement there where I'll say a particular statement which makes sense then. But for now, understand that reserved words are the words that cannot be identified as an identifier, which means when you are naming, like for example, let function is equal to this, I can't go ahead and say a function const. I can't give a identifier a keyword or a reserved word. It cannot be done. All right, so I cannot name a function called const because const itself is a keyword. So reserved words are the words that cannot be used as an identifier, which is a variable name or function name or class name or anything. And then they are reserved by the language. Obviously, they are reserved by the language. Now, this is a very, very important statement. Always remember this. All keywords are reserved words, but not all reserved words are keywords, which means every keyword that are there in the language are reserved words. Okay, they are reserved words, but there are a certain reserved words which are not keywords. Like for example, now in a programming language there might be certain reserved words which are not yet used in the programming language, but they can be used in future. Okay, there are cases there where a language would say there might be a reserved word which the programming language wanted to implement in next release. Okay, they have reserved it, but they are still not the keywords. All right, so always remember that all keywords are reserved words, but all reserved words are not keywords. All right, so always reserved word is a superset, okay, of keywords. So uh, all the keywords will be part of these reserved words, but with additional reserved words which can also be existing, which might be reserved for future use. All right, so just to give you a snapshot of how many reserved words are there. So almost like 63 64 reserved words are currently there as we speak today. And if you see, these are all the reserved words: abstract, argument, boolean, long, let. All these are the reserved words that are part of JavaScript vocabulary. Okay, but the ones you can see this asterisk symbol, guys, 8 reserved words, these are the ones that are newly added, because the programming language, right? Always, for that matter, any programming language, they keeps on evolving. The new things are always added to make the programming language more appropriate for that particular time period. All right. So as there is an advancement in the technology, the language also gets evolved. New keywords will be added, older ones will be obsolete, or they might be deleted. So that keeps on happening. Okay, so in this case, good example is like await, class, super. These are all the 8 reserved words that are newly added to the JavaScript programming language. So one example if I want to give you is, earlier, in order to declare a variable, there was only var keyword was used. Okay, var was the only keyword that was used earlier. But later, let and const were added, and these were newly added, and they can also be used to declare a variable. So now let, const, and var, all three can be used to declare a variable. All right. So that is about the reserved words. All right. All right. Let's jump into JavaScript variables. Variables are containers of storing values. We saw that how num1 was a variable which was used to store the value of 1, 2, 3. We saw that. And creating a variable in JavaScript is called declaring a variable. Okay. Here, let me give you an example. Let me clear this up. Yeah. Let's say premium. Let premium is equal to 1500. So now what are you doing here? You are creating a variable called premium. This is called declaring a variable. All right. Now here I need not assign any value. This is also fine. And if I recall what premium contains, premium is still undefined because it is not holding any value. All right. Now this is still a declaring a variable. Creating a variable in JavaScript is called declaring a variable. Now, variable declared without a value is holding the value called undefined. That is what we saw. Initially, we created a variable called premium, did not assign any value to it. That is the reason when I recall the premium, it is saying undefined. All right. That is what the statement means. All right. And there are 4 ways that you can declare a variable in JavaScript. What are these 4 ways? Again, mind you guys, this is very important, and try to pay attention here, because this forms the basis of learning JavaScript by creating a variables. Now there are 4 ways that we say. One couple of ways we already saw it using let, okay, and we also saw using const. Now you can also declare a variable using var. You can use it let, const, and also using nothing. Even that is also acceptable. Okay, you can not use anything but still declare a variable. Now, to give you one example, when I say nothing, let me take one by one. Okay, let's say I want to create using variable keyword called var. Let's say var, let's say global digits, global digit. Let's say I have created a value called variable called global digit, and here I have used assignment of, let's say, 9. So var global digit equal to 9, which means a variable global digit will store the value called 9. Okay, if I recall global digit, which will be storing the value 9. This is one way to declare a variable. Another way, let, we saw const. Now what I'm going to show you is the fourth one, which is using nothing, which means I can just go ahead and variable and assign a value. That's all I need to do, which means, let's say there is limits. Okay, limit is equal to 60. What it means is I am not using any keyword. I'm not using var, I'm not using let, I'm not using constant, I'm using nothing, which means I'm just taking a value, a variable name, and assigning the value 60. So whenever I recall limits, it will still be showing a value called 60. So again, there is a function inbuilt which is called type of. Type of is a function that is inbuilt in the JavaScript which will give you the data type. Like for example, limits. Now limits data type is number. So it is storing the value called 60. 60 is a number. So the type of limit is still a number. All right, whereas earlier I had defined a premium, right? Let's say earlier I have defined premium which was not storing any value. That is the reason it was undefined. The type of premium value was undefined, because how did I declare that variable? I declared that variable using this let premium. That's it. I'm not assigning any value to that premium. So there is one important learning here, that a variable in JavaScript will be assigned a data type whenever a value is stored in those variables. Until you do not store the value, then the variable will remain undefined. Okay, the data type of that variable will remain undefined. Now, and another important thing here is, let's say there is a value that it contains. Now global digit says 9. All right, now let's say global digit, I am going to reassign the value of string. Let's say I'm going to call this as 9. So always assignment of string is in the single quotes or double quotes. I can use double quotes here. Earlier I named var global digit is equal to 9. The type of global digit will be a number. Now instead of a number, I am assigning a value called a string value. It is acceptable in JavaScript. That is the reason we call JavaScript as a dynamically typed programming language, because the type of the variable can change dynamically depending on the value assigned to a variable. So now if I enter this, and if I go ahead and see the type of global digit will be string. Earlier here it was number, now it has changed to string because I have assigned a value called 9, which is a string data type. All right, that is the reason the type of global digit will now become a string. So that being said, again, naming a variable, the convention for naming a variable and an identifier goes hand in hand. They are same. Like we saw, how do you name an identifier? It can be contain alphanumeric characters, which is letters or digits, underscore and dollar sign. It is the same for variables. All right, and variables must begin with a letter, it cannot begin with a number. All right, and they can also begin with a dollar and underscore. That is what we saw. That is absolutely right with the identifier, and same is the case with the variable. And the reserved words cannot be used as a variable names. So we saw the another example, right? Function const, we tried to name the function as const. So that is not allowed, because const in itself is a reserved word. All right, you cannot use the reserved words as a variable name. And at the same time, the names are case sensitive. What it means is, let me give that example. Let's say price, let's say price is equal, price is equal to 99.99. All right, and then, oh sorry, let's say price is equal to, let's say price is equal to 88.88. So now understand this, guys, both are same. Okay, in HTML if you use price and price, it is same, because HTML is a case insensitive language, whereas JavaScript is a case sensitive language. Hence, this price in all small letters is different from this price which is in all capital letters. All right. Hence, they both store different value. Like this will store 99.99, whereas this price will store 88.88. That is what this means. The names are case sensitive. That is the reason these two are different, even though they have the same letters. All right, PRICE. This is also PRICE, but because of the case, they are different. Hence, JavaScript is a case sensitive language. Now, with that being said, let's understand this variable names with multiple words. Again, now this word is a single word. Okay, price is a single word. Okay, now let's say I want to write price dollar. Let's say price dollar is equal to 23, or let price rupee RUPPE rupee. Okay, now let's say this is rupee. Now what it contains, earlier we have seen an example where a variable name is a single word. Now here the variable name is a multiple words, which is more than one word. In this case, two words, price and dollar. Here price rupee. All right. Now in JavaScript there are certain conventions. Okay, conventions is like there are certain ways that you can write a multiple words variables. Okay, so variable names with multiple words, how what are the different ways that you can write? So user defined variable names can have more than one words, which might be very difficult to read. Now this is the case, like where does it ends? Is it price seed, price said LAR, or is it price dollar? Because if this goes a longer, right, if it contains 3 4 words, okay, premium for the premium for auto insurance value, if it contains 4 words, now in that case it will be very hard or very tough for the developers who work on the programming language to read it. Okay, now to make it simple, there are certain ways that you can use it to make them more readable. One is called camel case, another is called snake case, and third is called Pascal case. And what are these individually? We'll see that. So now camel case, whenever we say a camel case, the variable names where each word except the first starts with the capital letters. Like in this case, C is small letter, and whereas C here is a capital letter. This is called a camel case writing. So here the example will be, instead of writing this dollar price, I can say price and dollar. Okay, the first letter starts with small, and the first letter of the second word will start with a capital. That is what the camel casing is. Variable names where each word except the first starts with the capital letter. Here in this case, 2 words except the first, which is P, we are starting the second word by a capital letter. This is called camel case way of defining a variable name. Okay. Now, the another thing we can talk about is snake case. As the name suggests, it can use the underscore. Here, now understand, variable names where each word is separated by underscore. Like if you want to define the same, you can go ahead and say price underscore dollar. This is called snake casing. This is called camel casing, and this is called snake casing, because you are using the 2 words are separated by underscore symbol. All right, this is called snake casing. And next is Pascal casing. Pascal casing is very similar to camel casing. The only difference is all the words will start with capital letters. Okay, variable names where each word starts with capital letters. So in this case, the best way to define in the this one, what in Pascal casing is, every word starts with a capital letter. Now this is called Pascal casing. This is called camel casing because you're using underscore, each word is separated. And then this is called camel casing, where except the first word, all the words are starting with capital letters. In this case, D is starting with the capital letter. All right. Are you able to understand this, guys? What is the difference between camel case, snake case, and Pascal case?
Yes,
So,
sir.
yeah, why am I saying this is, whenever you write a program or you work in an organization, right, they follow a certain convention. Convention is they adhere to a certain standard, and different organization follows different standards. Some might use a camel case, some might use a Pascal case, depending on the coding standards. You follow the same, because when there is uniformity in your programming, then it improves the readability. Okay, all the developers who are working on the same project using the same module, at that time it becomes more more and more readable when you follow a certain standard naming conventions. Okay, these are some of them, depending on the organization that adhere to what standard, you follow the same. All right. Now, with that being said, just to recap, there are four ways that you can declare a variable. So, using var, let, and const, and using nothing.